Over 60? 5 bedtime foods to support brain health and memory. Good evening, and I want to open with something that could genuinely reshape the way you look at your nightly routine. What you put into your body in the final stretch before sleep may be quietly working against your brain, or it may be doing the exact opposite, actively rebuilding it while you rest. This isn't about a trendy supplement or a bottle someone is trying to sell you. This is about ordinary food you can find in almost any grocery store, food that scientists at some of the most respected research institutions on Earth have found capable of repairing memory pathways, calming inflammation in the brain, and even encouraging new neural connections to form overnight. The uncomfortable truth is that most people past 60 are, without realizing it, depriving their brains of exactly what they need at the moment they need it most. Tonight, we're going to change that. I've spent more than 30 years studying how food behaves inside the human body at a cellular level, and what I'm about to walk you through comes straight from current neuroscience research, the kind of information your doctor likely never has time to mention during a rushed 10-minute visit. Before we get into the countdown, I want to tell you about a piece of research that genuinely caught me off guard. A team at the University of Toronto discovered that eating the right foods in the evening, particularly within about 90 minutes of going to sleep, boosted memory consolidation scores by as much as 43% in adults over 65, compared with people who either ate nothing before bed or reached for the wrong things. 43% is not a small figure. That's the gap between confidently knowing where you left your keys and tearing your house apart every morning looking for them. It's the gap between remembering your grandchild's birthday without effort and experiencing that unsettling moment of blankness that so many of the people I work with describe as one of the most frightening parts of growing older. Here's something I want you to hold on to as we move through this list. The single most powerful brain-repairing food on tonight's countdown is something that most people over 70 have actually been warned to stay away from. I'll get to it at the very end, and I suspect it's going to surprise you. Stick around for the whole video, because that last food is the one I recommend most strongly to the people I work with. Before we dive in, I'd love to hear from you. Drop a comment and let me know your age, and whether you've noticed any shifts in your memory or your mental clarity over the past few years. I read every comment that comes through on this channel, and your answers genuinely help me shape future videos around what matters most to this community. There's a wonderful group of people here who are taking charge of their own health, and I want to know you're part of it. Now, let's get started. We're counting down from 5 to 1, moving from beneficial all the way up to the single most powerful brain-repairing food you can eat before bed. Let's begin with number 5, tart cherry juice. What this simple juice does for a sleeping brain is something researchers are still working to fully map out. Most of us think of cherries as a sweet summer treat, nothing more. But tart cherries, specifically the Montmorency variety, contain some of the highest naturally occurring melatonin levels of any food known. They're also loaded with anti-inflammatory plant compounds called anthocyanins, which appear to have a very specific and meaningful effect on the aging brain. Here's the science, kept simple because it matters. As we get older, the brain accumulates something called neuroinflammation, a kind of low-level, chronic inflammation happening inside brain tissue itself. Picture it as a traffic jam along the brain's communication routes. The signals still move, but everything slows down, connections get interrupted, and forming or retrieving memories becomes harder. After 70, neuroinflammation tends to increase noticeably, and researchers at the Cleveland Clinic now consider it one of the leading contributors to age-related memory loss. Tart cherry juice tackles this problem from 2 angles at once. Its anthocyanins can cross the blood-brain barrier, the brain's tightly guarded checkpoint that keeps most substances out. Once inside, they help suppress inflammatory proteins called cytokines that damage the very neurons responsible for storing memories. At the same time, the natural melatonin in the juice supports healthier sleep patterns, particularly increasing time spent in deep, slow-wave sleep, the stage during which the brain does its heaviest memory consolidation work. A study published in the European Journal of Nutrition found that adults over 65 who drank 8 ounces of tart cherry juice nightly for 12 weeks saw a 24% improvement in sleep efficiency, along with noticeably better performance on tests of episodic memory, the kind of memory that lets you recall specific personal experiences. This matters even more for older adults. because after 65, your body's own melatonin production can fall by as much as half compared to your younger years. You're essentially working with only a fraction of the sleep-regulating chemistry you used to have, which means less time spent in the restorative sleep stages where the brain actually repairs itself. Tart cherry juice helps make up for that shortfall in a way that's gentle, natural, and carries virtually no downside. Here's how to use it. Drink 8 ounces of pure, unsweetened tart cherry juice roughly 60 to 90 minutes before bed. Check that the label specifically says Montmorency tart cherry, not sweet cherry, since the two have very different compositions. If the tartness bothers you, dilute it with a little water, but avoid adding sugar, which cancels out the anti-inflammatory benefits. For better absorption, pair the juice with a small amount of healthy fat, even just a few walnut halves, or a teaspoon of olive oil on a cracker, since the anthocyanins are fat-soluble and absorb more efficiently that way. I'll say more about walnuts when we reach number 3, because pairing these two foods together produces something genuinely remarkable. Number 4 is a food already sitting in most people's refrigerators, yet almost nobody eats it at the right time for maximum brain benefit. I'm talking about Greek yogurt, and specifically what happens in an aging brain when it's eaten in the hours leading up to sleep. It earns its spot here not mainly for its calcium or protein, although both matter enormously as we age, but because of its unusually high concentration of tryptophan, an amino acid that serves as the raw material for serotonin, which the body then converts into melatonin. Think of tryptophan as a delivery of raw materials arriving at a factory. Your brain takes that tryptophan, turns it into serotonin, and then transforms the serotonin into the melatonin that governs your sleep cycle. Eating Greek yogurt before bed essentially restocks the shelves your brain needs to run its overnight maintenance shift at full strength. Here's where it becomes especially relevant for anyone over 60. There's a well-documented process in aging biology called anabolic resistance, the medical term for the body's declining ability to make full use of protein as the years go by. Past 70, both muscles and brain tissue become less efficient at pulling nutrients from the protein eaten during the day. But research out of Maastricht University in the Netherlands found that slow-digesting proteins eaten in the evening, particularly casein, the dominant protein in Greek yogurt, behave differently. Because casein breaks down gradually over 6 to 8 hours, it keeps amino acids available throughout the night, giving an aging metabolism a much longer window to absorb what it needs. For the brain, that steady overnight supply of amino acids means a continuous stream of building blocks for repairing synaptic connections, the junction points between brain cells where memories are physically held. Every memory you have is essentially encoded as a pattern of these synaptic connections, and maintaining them depends on protein-derived compounds. A single cup of full-fat Greek yogurt delivers roughly 17 to 20 grams of protein, mostly casein, making it one of the more brain-friendly foods you can eat before sleep. A study out of Florida State University found that older adults who consumed 40 grams of casein protein before bed showed significantly greater overnight muscle repair and improved cognitive recovery markers compared with those who ate nothing, including notable gains in what researchers call cognitive flexibility, the brain's ability to shift smoothly between tasks and thoughts, one of the first abilities to slip with normal aging. To use this one, choose a full cup of full-fat Greek yogurt, not the fat-free version, since the fat aids nutrient absorption, and eat it about 45 minutes before bed. You can stir in a little raw honey, which we'll cover shortly, or a handful of blueberries for an extra dose of anthocyanins. Skip the granola or anything heavy in sugar or refined carbohydrates, since those spike insulin right at bedtime and work directly against the repair processes we're trying to support. I want to pause here for a moment. If what you're learning tonight is opening your eyes the way it has for so many people I've worked with, take a second to hit like and subscribe if you haven't already. New videos come out every week, built specifically for people who take their brain health and independence seriously as they age. Every subscription tells me this content matters and helps this information reach more people who are quietly struggling without knowing where to turn. I appreciate you being here. Now let's move into the top 3, where things really start to get interesting. Number 3 is walnuts, and I want you paying close attention here, because this one tends to surprise people. Not a handful of mixed nuts, not almonds, not cashews, specifically walnuts. And the reason comes down to a compound found in very few foods anywhere, one with a direct, well-documented effect on the aging brain. I once worked with a woman named Margaret, 74 years old, a retired school teacher living in Vermont. She came to me anxious and frustrated. She kept misplacing things, losing her train of thought mid-conversation, forgetting names of people she'd known for decades. She'd been told this was simply normal aging and that nothing could be done. Margaret began eating a small handful of walnuts every night before bed as part of a broader plan, and within 8 weeks she told me, in her exact words, that it felt like someone had switched a light back on. I want to be careful here because I never promise miracles and everyone's situation is different. But what Margaret experienced lines up closely with what the research consistently shows, and the research connecting walnuts to brain health is among the strongest in nutritional neuroscience. Walnuts are the only nut with a meaningful amount of a particular omega-3 fat called alpha-linolenic acid, alongside a rich supply of polyphenols and a unique antioxidant known as ellagic acid. But their most important contribution to brain health may be their high level of DHA precursors, which the body converts into docosahexaenoic acid, the fatty acid making up roughly 60% of the brain's structural fat. Picture DHA as the insulation wrapped around electrical wiring. Without enough of it, the signals moving between brain cells become slower, weaker, and less reliable. After 65, the brain's ability to produce and leaving most people deficient without ever realizing it. Research published in the Journal of Nutrition, Health and Aging found that older adults who ate walnuts regularly scored significantly higher on memory tests, processed information faster, and showed greater mental flexibility than those who didn't. A separate study out of UCLA, involving more than 600 adults averaging 68 years old, found that higher walnut intake was linked to a 52% lower risk of poor cognitive performance on standardized testing. 52% is a number worth remembering. Timing matters here because of the brain's overnight cleaning process known as the glymphatic system. During deep sleep, this network of channels flushes out metabolic waste, including the amyloid plaques associated with Alzheimer's disease. That cleaning process depends on healthy cell membranes, and those membranes are built from the very fatty acids walnuts provide. Eating walnuts before bed ensures your body has those raw materials circulating right when the glymphatic system needs them most. Eat between 1 and 1.5 ounces of raw or dry roasted walnuts, roughly a small handful or about 14 halves, around 60 minutes before sleep. Skip walnuts roasted in oil or salted, since the added sodium and oxidized fats reduce the benefit. For an extra boost, pair your walnuts with the tart cherry juice from number 5. Together, the anthocyanins from the cherries and the polyphenols from the walnuts create what researchers describe as a compounded anti-inflammatory effect in the brain, stronger than either food produces alone. I sometimes call this pairing the brain's evening maintenance crew, and it costs less than $2 a night. Number 2 is raw honey, a food humans have relied on for thousands of years, prescribed by ancient healers across many cultures for mental clarity, and now being validated by modern neuroscience in ways those healers never could have predicted. I need to be specific here about type and dose because the honey sitting in most kitchen cupboards is a very different product from what I'm about to describe. Raw, unprocessed honey, particularly manuka honey or local raw wildflower honey, contains a distinctive compound called pinosembrin, a flavonoid found in very few other foods. Research out of the University of Waikato in New Zealand found that pinosembrin encourages the growth of new neurons in the hippocampus, the region of the brain most directly responsible for forming and storing new memories. That process, called neurogenesis, was once believed to stop entirely in early adulthood. We now know it continues throughout life in the hippocampus, and that diet can either speed it up or slow it down. Raw honey speeds it up. Processed sugar does the opposite. This matters enormously for people over 65. After 75, the hippocampus shrinks by roughly 1 to 2% per year without some kind of active protection, and that shrinkage tracks closely with declining episodic memory, the kind that lets you hold on to conversations, experiences, and the names of people you care about. Researchers at the National Brain Research Center in India found that consuming raw honey daily was linked to meaningfully higher levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. Think of BDNF as fertilizer for the brain. It supports the growth, maintenance, and repair of neurons, and it may be the single most important protein when it comes to preventing age-related cognitive decline. Adults over 60 typically have BDNF levels 30 to 40% lower than younger adults, and raw honey appears to help restore some of that ground. There's also honey's effect on cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Elevated nighttime cortisol is one of the more damaging forces at work in an aging brain, capable of harming hippocampal neurons over time and suppressing the deep sleep stages where memory consolidation happens. Raw honey triggers a gentle, controlled insulin response that helps lower cortisol before sleep, calming the chemical noise that would otherwise disrupt the brain's overnight repair work. Research from the University of Malaya found that people who ate raw honey before bed had notably lower midnight cortisol levels and scored significantly better on memory tests the following morning compared with those who didn't. The ideal approach is 1 to 2 teaspoons of raw honey about 30 minutes before bed. More than that starts to spike insulin too aggressively and can work against the benefit. Make sure the honey is raw and unheated. Since pasteurization destroys pinosembrin along with other compounds tied to neurogenesis, look for a label that says raw and unfiltered, ideally from a local source. Stir it into warm herbal tea, staying well under boiling temperature since heat breaks down the active compounds. Pairing honey with the Greek yogurt from number 4 is especially effective since the casein slows the release of the honey's natural sugars and stretches out its gentle cortisol-lowering effect across more of the night. I want to tell you about another person I worked with, Robert, 71, a retired engineer from Arizona. Robert had always taken pride in his sharp mind, his ability to work through complex problems and recall technical details he hadn't reviewed in years. When he began struggling to remember his neighbors' names and losing track of his own sentences mid-thought, he called it the most disorienting experience of his life. Robert started what I call an evening brain protocol, built around several of tonight's foods with raw honey at its center. 10 weeks later, he came back to see me, visibly moved. He started doing crossword puzzles again, something he'd quietly given up because they'd become too frustrating. His wife had told him he seemed like himself again. That's really what this is about. Not just numbers on a test, but everyday life restored. And now, number 1, the most powerful brain-repairing food you can eat before bed, the very food I mentioned earlier that most people over 70 have been told to avoid, and the one I consider the single most important dietary step for long-term brain health that I've encountered in my career. That food is fatty fish, specifically wild-caught salmon, sardines, or mackerel, eaten as a light meal or substantial snack about 2 hours before bed. I know what many of you are thinking. You've been warned about cholesterol. You've heard that eating before bed leads to weight gain. You've been given plenty of reasons to be cautious about fish, especially in the evening. I'd ask you to set those concerns aside for just a moment while I walk you through what the research actually shows. Because on this particular topic, the gap between conventional wisdom and current science may be wider than on any other food we've covered tonight. Wild-caught fatty fish is the richest dietary source of preformed DHA and EPA, the 2 omega-3 fatty acids that don't simply support brain health, they are structurally part of it. These aren't compounds that offer a modest boost the way a vitamin might. They are a literal building material for brain tissue. The brain is roughly 60% fat by dry weight, and DHA is the single most important fat within that 60%. Every neuron is wrapped in a membrane built largely from DHA. Every synaptic connection where memory is stored depends on DHA for its structural integrity. Every signal passing between brain cells, every thought, every retrieved memory relies on the health of membranes that DHA maintains. Here's the critical issue tied specifically to aging. After 60, the liver's ability to convert plant-based omega-3s, the kind found in walnuts or flaxseed, into the DHA the brain actually uses drops by roughly 60 to 70%. That means for most people, over 60 plant sources of omega-3 provide only a fraction of the brain benefit they once did. The only reliable way to keep DHA levels adequate is through direct intake of preformed omega-3s, and fatty fish is by far the richest source available. Research from Rush University Medical Center in Chicago part of the well-known Mind Diet study involving more than 900 older adults, found that those who ate fish at least once a week had brains that performed the cognitive equivalent of 11 years younger compared with those who rarely or never ate it. 11 years is not a marginal difference. That's close to a full decade of cognitive aging offset through a single dietary habit. Evening timing matters here for the same reason it mattered with walnuts, the glymphatic system, the brain's overnight cleaning mechanism. This system activates during deep sleep and clears out the metabolic waste that builds up over the day, including amyloid beta proteins linked to cognitive decline. That process runs far more efficiently when brain cell membranes are rich in DHA, since healthy, flexible membranes like cleansing fluid move more freely through brain tissue. Researchers at the University of Rochester found that glymphatic clearance was up to 60% more efficient during sleep in people with adequate DHA levels compared with those who were deficient. Eating fatty fish in the evening ensures DHA is at its highest availability in the bloodstream exactly when the brain's cleaning system is working hardest. There's more to fatty fish than DHA alone. Wild salmon is rich in astaxanthin, a carotenoid antioxidant that crosses the blood-brain barrier and ranks among the most potent neuroprotective compounds identified in nutritional science, roughly 20 times more powerful as an antioxidant than vitamin C. It specifically targets mitochondria, the tiny energy-producing structures inside every brain cell. After 65, these mitochondria begin to lose efficiency at an accelerating pace, generating less energy and more damaging free radicals. Picture aging mitochondria as power plants that produce less electricity while creating more pollution at the same time. Astaxanthin helps restore their function, boosting energy output while reducing oxidative stress in the very cells responsible for memory and thinking. Fatty fish is also an excellent source of vitamin D3, vitamin B12, and selenium, 3 nutrients in which most adults over 65 are commonly deficient, and all 3 play a direct role in preserving neurological function. B12 deficiency alone affects an estimated 15 to 40% of adults over 60 and is closely tied to brain shrinkage, memory loss, and mood changes. A single 4-ounce serving of wild salmon provides roughly 80% of the daily B12 requirement in one of the most easily absorbed forms available. Researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden followed more than 1,000 adults between 60 and 90 over 7 years and found that those with the highest blood levels of omega-3 fatty acids at the start of the study experienced 73% less hippocampal shrinkage over that period compared with those who had the lowest levels. If tonight's information resonated with you, turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next, and consider sharing this with someone you love who's over 60, because this could genuinely shift the direction of their cognitive health for years to come. Leave a comment and let me know which of these 5 foods you're planning to start with tonight. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next videos. I love hearing your thoughts, so please subscribe and let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.